Alright, so lots to cover in today's video. I'm going to try and be as direct as possible with all of it. Today we're taking a look at this guy. This is the Eluktronics Luminosa. This is their first entrance into peripheral making, and if you guys are wondering where you may have heard Eluktronics before, when I went with Brian Stroh of BPS Customs to CES this past January, they actually sponsored the editing system that I used to help him create some of those videos. Now, first and foremost, I want to say a huge thank you to not only Eluktronics for helping me out with making this review, but also Brian Phillips over at Bad Seed Tech for sending over his review sample that he used for the video that he made. And I'll go ahead and link his down in the video's description. He may touch on a couple of other things that maybe I don't touch on here, and his peripheral reviews are on point. So let's talk a little bit about what you get here for $40 US. For starters, this is based on the MotoSpeed V70 mouse chassis, so before you go out and try reviewing some pictures and trying to figure out where you've seen it before, that's the mouse chassis that it's built on. Basically, everything else about this product from the ground up has been retooled and re-engineered by Eluktronics, including things like the switches and the sensor and things like that. Now, the body for this mouse does have a right-handed ergonomic shape to it, kind of a shallow hump in the center of it, and while it is marketed as being acceptable for basically all grip types, I will personally say that I really enjoy using this mouse with either a claw grip or a fingertip grip, depending on the application or the game that I'm using at the time. It weighs in at about 94 grams, but it definitely handles lighter than that, and we'll discuss why in a bit. The plastics feel reasonably durable on this mouse, and it actually is advertised as having a durable coating that won't wear off. I'm always hesitant about claims like that with coated surfaces like these, so take that specific item with a grain of salt, but I will say that the coating does feel really nice, and it feels significantly more durable than what I've used on other mice in the past. So since this has made its way onto my desktop as my daily driver mouse, I'll definitely be putting that claim to the test. We also have some slightly opaque plastics throughout the body. That, of course, is where all of your RGB LEDs illuminate out of. Now, flipping it over to the underside, we do have 3 feet on the bottom of this mouse. The rear foot feels really awesome for me because the way I tend to lift off my mouse for repositioning, I tend to only want to lift up the front while the back skates around a lot. So for that type of lift-off style, and because it adds extra stability, that feels really nice. I personally would have liked to see the front feet joined into one continuous foot across the front of the mouse, but it still feels extremely nimble, and of course you do get a second pair of skates if you decide you want to take the mouse apart and resurface it, or if you just get tired of these feet and want to put new ones on. Now, I will also briefly mention that these mouse feet set the mouse up off of whatever surface you're using a fair amount, so it feels a lot more stable and it glides more just on the feet than having any of the edges of the body touch on your mouse surface, which just makes it feel that much more confident in hand. Now, of course, this mouse is using the PixArt 3389 sensor. This is an optical sensor. Gets you a resolution of up to 16,000 dpi. Not really certain that there's even a prosumer application for that level of sensitivity, but it's there if you need it, and it does step in 200 dpi increments as low as, I believe, 200 or 400 dpi. I'll leave a note down here at the bottom clarifying which one it is. Now, as far as buttons go, the Luminosa has 7 in total. Left and right click, your scroll wheel click, your DPI adjustment buttons, and your 2 thumb buttons. The left and right clicks are using 50 million click rated Omron switches, while the other buttons on the mouse are using 20 million click rated Huano switches. Now, if you're not familiar with the name Huano, I'm going to simplify it for you with this product. The Huano switches and the Omron switches are kind of indistinguishable from one another here, and both of them feel extremely nice. Now, as far as how the mouse sounds, let's go ahead and take you to the click test. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the specs of the mouse in terms of dimensions up on the screen here, because this is kind of important when you're talking about ergonomics for a mouse chassis. Again, this is a right-handed mouse, so southpaws need not apply if you were looking to use this product. Now, depending on your hand size, you may have kind of a hard time, in my opinion, using this mouse with a palm style grip, even though you technically can get away with it, and by and large, it should be fine. But once you start getting into the upper end of medium size or large size hands, that prospect may become a little bit uncomfortable. But I can confidently state that the dip in the center of this mouse chassis is awesome for claw or tip grip style mouse usage, especially with the crosshatch pattern that's on the left and right hand side of the mouse to aid in gripping the mouse. The only problem I have with the little crosshatch pattern is that it unfortunately is going to be a magnet for hand grime, especially for people like myself that have naturally oily skin. There's really nothing you can do to avoid that. You're just going to need to clean the mouse on a fairly regular basis. I would recommend something like a soft bristle brush just to sort of gently go over it and get some of that nastiness out. Now, the real kicker for me with this mouse was the cable. I've personally never used a mouse with a stock paracord cable before, but if you decide to jump into this product and you're not familiar with why this cable feels and does what it does, basically, a normal mouse cable has this sort of hard rubber insulation around the outside of the 3 or 4 cables, however many it is, that actually comprise a USB cable. With this particular cable, those individual cable runs on the inside have their own individual layers of insulation, and this stock paracord is what replaces the rubber coating on the outside. What this leaves you with is a really, really easy to use cable. It does exactly what you want it to do when you want it to do it, and the paracord provides so little drag on a tabletop surface or even around something like a desktop satellite speaker that I barely even notice the existence of this cable, even during lower DPI gaming sessions when I'm playing something like Borderlands 2 or Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, where I prefer more control with my aiming. The other nice thing about the cable is that it exits not only a fair amount up from the bottom of the mouse chassis, but it also exits at a slight upward angle, which helps reduce drag even more with this mouse cable. Seriously, probably one of the best cables I've ever used on a mouse. Now, as far as the software goes, it's pretty lightweight, fairly intuitive, got your basic functionality that you would expect from this type of programmable mouse. You've got several different profiles that you can save. You've got button remapping, you've got macro control, polling rate adjustments, DPI adjustment, and RGB control. RGB lighting can be controlled within 7 independent lighting zones consisting of 1 LED per side of the mouse. Now, unfortunately, the only zones that you can't synchronize with any of the special effects for the mouse are the Eluktronics logo on your palm and the lighting around the scroll wheel. That lighting is presently only in place to indicate which DPI stepping mode you're using, and you can have the mouse set up with up to 8 different points of DPI stepping, depending on your specific use case scenario, what DPI settings you prefer, etc. My main issue with this was something I touched on before. You only get DPI stepping in 200 DPI increments. It would be nice to see this adjusted to 100 DPI, but I'm not really certain if that's a hardware limitation of the sensor and the way it's implemented in the mouse, or if that's just a software thing that they can adjust in a later revision of the software. Now, the best thing about the software, you don't have to keep it installed after you've used it. Basically, you only need the software installed in order to actually set up the mouse the way you want it to be used. Then afterwards, it's all saved on the mouse body, and then you can uninstall the software and it'll just continue to work as intended, including any of the macros you had set up. So that's a really nice touch. Now, as far as testing the mouse is concerned, I did use 2 different mouse surfaces for this. Both of them are the Eluktronics mouse pads that they have, one being cloth, one being a hard surface. The cloth surface was pretty well constructed. I mean, it's nothing super special to write home about. Nice, clean Eluktronics logo in the center. You've got some nice clean stitching on the outside edge of the mouse mat to give it some more durability and staying power, and a nice clean cloth surface, but it is a control surface. You don't get really a lot of smooth gliding on it, so if you're the type of player that prefers a bit more control in your mouse movements, that's going to be the mouse mat you gravitate towards. But if you're someone like me that prefers a faster, smooth surface with minimal drag, the hard mat is definitely going to be what you gravitate towards. Now, this mat does have some RGB lighting control built into it. It's just 2 buttons at the front of the mouse pad, so there's no software control of it. The lighting does look pretty good. The modes are, you know, standard fare for what you would expect for a basic RGB mouse pad, but it looks pretty clean, and the surface actually has an extremely fine texture to it. There's very minimal divots that you feel on the surface, although I will say that the mouse mat that I got in does have a few slightly uneven spots across the surface. It's not something that you really notice in practice until you have the mouse resting in one spot. Sometimes I'll be able to feel it pivoting on one of the corners, so that's a little weird. Not really sure what's going on with that, but again, I do prefer the fast surface like this. So as far as my everyday use was concerned, this mouse was extremely comfortable in hand. The shape was awesome for my hand size and my grip style. The sensor tracks exceptionally accurately, and I actually find that I have to use a lot less in-game tweaking of my mouse sensitivity than I did with my previous mouse, which is something that you kind of take for granted when you've been using the same product for so long. And DAT RGB lighting looks so clean on this mouse. It's a really tasteful implementation, the lighting is really well diffused, and I really like the effects that they have here, although I admittedly did just go for a static lighting effect that matches my rig. But anyway, to close everything up, there's really not anything bad that I have to say about this mouse. Would it have been cool for it to be an ambidextrous design? Sure, that's always nice to be able to cater to your left-handed user base as well. Would it be nice for there to have been a few more RGB lighting modes? Sure, I guess, but it's lighting, who cares? At $40, I'm really impressed with what this product brings to the consumer, and even if you were going to use this, again, in a professional environment, granted, it would have to be one in which something with onboard memory is acceptable for day-to-day use, but even in a professional environment, the functionality that this mouse gives you makes it a really versatile product, and I have a hard time not recommending it. Especially if you're a budget-conscious consumer like myself and you don't have a lot of money to spend, but you want to get as much out of your money as possible, definitely check out the Eluktronics Luminosa. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Again, huge shout out to Brian Phillips over at Bad Seed Tech and Eluktronics for helping me make this review possible. I'm gonna be doing a long-term test on this mouse. It's become my daily driver, so I'm gonna put that no wear coat claim to the test. So stay tuned for the update on that one. Toss a thumbs up on the video if you liked what you saw. Get subscribed for more content coming at you every other week. Also, be sure to follow me on my social media feeds. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the Manic Geek. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time. So take it easy.